Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Dear friends, so this Dhamma talk some more about the aspect about life and dying, and then also go into uh, some other about developing a right understanding. And there's the Buddha gave a simile about the life in samsara. I think yesterday I mentioned the samsara, the idea of the wheel of birth and death. With these minds, individual minds, have been revolving through the rounds of uh, existence in different levels, in different realms, according to their karma. A person is born, lives a lifespan, then dies one way or another. The mind, its karmically energized mind, is then attracted like a magnetic pull to a place or an environment that will allow it to sort of continue to work out its karmic knots or to reap the results of what it had accumulated. So the minds of one, in a sense, beginningless time. There's no particular point in time when people started being born and reborn and dying. Now, of course, certain religions have a nice little viewpoint about it, how it all started at a certain point in time, and they appeared on Earth like poof, and that happened. But so it's a simile of if you took one person's mind and all the bones that that person had accumulated in different lifetimes as being a human being or being as an animal, if after death those bones, were kind of kept, were cremated or decayed and piled up, that those bones would be bigger than the Himalayan mountain range. Just one person, the bones of one person. Uh, and during those lifetimes, we've been each other's mother, brother, father, sister, aunt, uncle, grandparents, friend, enemy, and stranger, almost to every other living being. Now, whether you believe that or not, that's another thing. But anyway, that is the viewpoint from the Dhamma, from the Buddha's own vast experience of remembering through his meditation, and so on. So, and if so, we have all those memories, and the we've accumulated all this karma. We've accumulated good karma as well as bad karma. And that's what we are now. We were born in this life as a sum total of everything we've accumulated. And that's why also, because the memories of past lives, even when we were killed in horrible ways as being an animal with our head cut off, or killed in so many other ways, we have a lot of grief, accumulated grief from these memories, even from last lifetimes. Now that's why, Westerners who don't believe in rebirth and think this lifetime is the only thing, that's why it's so difficult for them to understand how we have so many emotions and how many people, every single person is different and so on, and how deep in the mind is entrenched in so many, unskillful habits and so on. So anyway, we have all those memories, and that's why some people have, phobias, like phobias. You're born and for no reason. They were terrified of the duck, or they're terrified of certain types of people, or they're terrified of heights. They have various phobias, and and even, of course, we all know about child prodigy, somebody like Mozart, who wrote big symphonies at the age of 3 or 4, and other beings like that. It doesn't make sense. How do they get all this in one life, in just a few years, these extraordinary types of talents and so on. Of course, people say, "Oh, it's in the genes," and so on. Okay, it might be, but maybe it's not also. But so basically there's 3 types of death. There's the physical death at the bottom. We already talked about. It could come. Death is certain, but the time of death is not certain. How we'll die or where we'll die is not certain. Because we read it all the time in newspapers, right? Even young people with a whole life ahead of them, just coming back from the innocent party, get killed in an accident or so many other things. We read it all the time. But then there's momentary death. And basically, that refers to the mental process of these mind moments arising and vanishing because of the stimulation, sense stimulation. And sound hits the ear, and hearing occurs, all the memories of that object arise, and then we react to that object. But that happens in a nanosecond. But it occurs rapidly over and over and over again, so it seems like it's lasting a long time, but actually, it's like that. The frames of a movie camera, each one of those is a single frame. And one frame of a movie camera is not going to mean very much. Only when you run 10 or 15, then you see somebody take a few steps or talk a few words or something. And that's what we can experience in meditation. Well, in the deepest stages of vipassana, you can actually see those moments arising and vanishing, but that's a very advanced level. But the important death is ego death. Now that's real death in the Dhamma. Death of the physical body is not that important because it's going to happen. And death of the physical body simply, it's like changing clothes. The body dies, the mind is released, the mind gets another body somewhere. and then arises as another being. So it's just like going in and changing your clothes and come out in a new set of clothes. But of course, the life is important. But the ego death is because it's the sense of self and ego and the ignorance, accumulated ignorance, greed, and hatred that is what propels the mind to another existence. Because the state of enlightenment, people like the Buddha or Arahants who having practiced the path, reach, eliminate greed, hatred, and delusion, develop wisdom. That mind is no longer reborn anywhere. It just kind of merges into the ocean of awareness, just to use that term. So it doesn't, go on. So that's the ego death. And we can experience that even in meditation. And some of you may have experienced that when you gain a deep level of concentration. I think I mentioned this already, that everything gets real calm. And at a certain point, the feeling of your body might even disappear. The body doesn't disappear, but actually, your feeling of a body is something that's being created in your mind. This idea of a solid body and you being in it is actually a part of the mental mood. So, but that can, when you're no longer paying attention, oh, pain in my knee, oh, scratching my face, oh, I have to go here tomorrow, and I want, that happened. As long as we're identifying with what we've done, that is what keeps it together in our mind. That's why in meditation, when you kind of let go of all that, when your thoughts subside, you gain concentration, then the sense of ego has nothing to identify with, so it kind of just evaporates or fades away because it needs that stimulus and it needs that memory in order to keep recreating its sense of I, me, or mine. That's why people with a lot of attachments, they feel, their egos are very strong because they're identified with that. And they feed off of that. Anyway, so at a certain point, that sense of self may start to fade away. And then people usually get scared or fear arises because it's the fear of death. So the mind gets jerked back into thinking. But in that state, you can actually, feel that sense of self fading away. And if you get over the fear, it becomes one of the most blissful experiences. Because with that, all fears and worries and anxieties and everything else vanish with it. And that's, of course, why meditation has been something that's been practiced for, thousands and thousands of years by so many, people in various walks of life, as spiritual experiences. Anyway, so that ego of death is the real death from the Dhamma point of view. Now, the karma is what keeps the mind going. And, karma is sort of like the gasoline. Every time you do an action, a karmic action, a conscious action, then that is like it strengthens the sankharas. Like every time you use a bad speech, or every time, just, habits like scratching an itch, that strengthens those habits. And so those habits go into the gas tank of sankhara, the sankhara kanda, the fourth of those aggregates, to be fuel for it to happen again. And so we keep on adding fuel to the tank by our conscious type of actions. Because the conscious type of actions are what increase the sense of self and ego. Every time you do something that you won a competition, oh, I won, I got it. And if you lost, oh, I lost, I'm so sad. So, that keeps on re-strengthening the sense of I, so it will keep coming up over and over again. And that's why it's hard to kind of transcend that in the meditation. But so actually the practice of meditation is a practice of dying. Because it's that ego death that has to be let go of. I mean, if your aim is to attain liberation, some people don't care about liberation, they just want to meditate and enjoy life, and that's okay. But if your aim is to gain some spiritual realization and what they call complete mental freedom, then that's the way it's normally done. But the karma is a learning process. Actually, each life is like a classroom in school, each grade. And we were born in this world to learn something, to learn a lesson. Some lessons about selflessness, lessons of generosity, lessons of kindness, lessons of compassion, and so on. Lessons to integrate back in and live with the law of, in harmony with the laws of nature. The laws of nature, again, what was that law of nature I mentioned? Law of karma, right? The karma says, if you act with greed, hatred, and delusion, suffering will come. So that's living out of harmony with the laws of nature, because the laws of nature says that the mind is always wanting happiness. So people are living out of harmony with the laws of nature. So each life is like a classroom. If you don't learn the lessons, then what happens if you fail 10th grade or any grade? You have to repeat it, right? So that's what rebirth is. It's repeating it over and over until we learn the lessons. Like if you keep beating your head against the wall, boom, 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 at some point you're going to wake up and go, why am I doing that? So that's the way we should, see that. That each life is another opportunity. If we didn't make it in this life, there's another opportunity. Now, some religions say you only got one life, If you fail, you're going to go to hell forever. That's tough. But in the Dhamma, you got many opportunities. So death should be considered a great adventure when you die. A great adventure. The journey into the unknown. So we have to kind of change our attitude toward it if we want to, die or not to be, at least not to be scared or afraid of the death. Again, it's not that we want to die, no. It's very important to live as long as you possibly can in order to make enough progress on the path, and that hopefully the mind won't be carried to a place of suffering in the future. Because basically, how you live is how you'll die. It's not necessarily all in that linear kind of order, no. So that's why the karma is an evolutionary tool that you will wake up and evolve around. If you keep on telling lies and getting caught all the time, suffer, and then can't sleep at night because you're worried about getting caught for telling lies or doing anything else, that's a lot of mental suffering. And then, so to learn from it, or doing any of those other skillful actions, you can see so much suffering comes to, every kind of suffering comes due to breaking the precepts. I mean, just think of it. If everybody could just follow the 5 precepts, right? 5 little precepts. Why can't people follow 5 precepts? Why? Basically because they can't control their urges, and of course because of conditioning and so on. And philosophical beliefs or religious beliefs have even added to that, perhaps in some degrees as well. Or the belief that there's nothing going to happen after death, so why should we do anything good? Just eat, drink, and be merry, and do anything you want, and trample over other people. Because you think there's going to be no result of your actions. So that's the way we need to see each life as learning the lessons. But you have to do your homework. And so the way to learn those lessons, or the way to live back in harmony with the laws of nature, that's in the Dhamma teachings, in the Buddhist teaching, the 4 Noble Truths, is the path leading to the end of suffering. And that is the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. I think everybody has heard of the Eightfold Path, right? Anybody not? Raise your hand. So the first step of that Noble Eightfold Path is right understanding. Because the Buddha didn't want us to do things without understanding why. Not just like, here these set of rules, believe them, do them, don't ask any questions, and so on. Or else. So the right understanding, there's 3 levels of right understanding or wisdom. When we say right understanding, it also refers to that wisdom. So the first level is the intellectual level. Now, the way most of us found the Dhamma, unless you were born in a Buddhist country and learned the Buddhism from when you were a child, most people born here in America, at least back in the 50s or 60s, before internet and plethora of books on the subject and so on, Buddhism hardly was even known in this country. And so the way we learned is if we were lucky to get a hold of a book or hear about it. In fact, in my own experience, this was in the 60s, 1965 or so. I was down in Mexico surfing, and I was walking in Tijuana, you probably heard of Tijuana, well, place, but so along the street they have all these shops selling, Mexican handicrafts like pottery, bulls and matadors, and this Mexican type of pottery. And I'd seen a lot of those things before, shops. And when I was walking along this one street, and then something caught my attention, and I looked, and it was a golden Buddha, but I didn't know it was a Buddha at that time. It was a golden statue sitting on a little table higher than the black cats and the matadors and bulls and things like that. And it just captivated my mind because I never saw such a thing. And just its expression. And it seemed to be saying, now, I wasn't doing that. That's what it seemed to me. I was on acid then. So I went and bought it and took it home. And my mother said, "Oh, that's a Buddha statue." I go, what's a Buddha? She said, "Go read it." So we had an Encyclopedia Britannica. It's about how they found out about anything in those days. Encyclopedia Britannica. And so I read about the Buddha. Just, a simple kind of description, how he was a prince and gave that up and searched for truth, attained enlightenment, and so on. So, but, okay, but then I just used the Buddha as a kind of a hat rack. I had it in my room on my TV, and, it was kind of disrespectful, I know now, but, at night, I would kind of look at it, and then I would he was like he was trying to tell me something, and I didn't want to, learn it. But but anyway, many years later, then when I took a world religions class after I got out of the army, and I had this desire to travel to India, but not to go to India to find a guru like the Beatles did, but to just to have a lot of fun and games and smoke good hashish and all kind of trek in the Himalayas and all these things that the hippies talked about. So yeah, so I took a course in world religions because I knew I'd be traveling through countries along the way to India, including going to Israel. I thought, maybe I'll work on a kibbutz for a while, and then go to the Middle East. So I took this course in world religions, and we had to write a term paper on the religion that we attracted us to. And I chose Buddhism. I don't know why. We had a textbook, and it was very rudimentary, basic stuff about, as I mentioned, Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path and meditation, and it kind of made more sense than the other religions that we were studying. So I wrote this paper and went to the library. I had to go to the library. Interested in it. There's no place to go. There was no temples. There was hardly any books. And so I just forgot it. So that little bit of intellectual understanding, I forgot about it. And then I went back to, partying and, getting stoned and all that. And then going to India. So that intellectual understanding didn't do me too much good at that point. So because the next level of understanding is you have to think about the Dhamma. You have to think about what you read or heard. Because you all know that if you just read something one time, you don't think about it anymore. A couple of days later, what this thing? You forget. So you need to start thinking about the Dhamma. And that's the second level of understanding. And also it's a second step of the Noble Eightfold Path, right thought. But anyway, so the first level of understanding is intellectual understanding. The second level is the understanding that comes by reflecting, thinking and reflecting about the Dhamma, which would include even in meditation. You know, when you meditate, even if you're not gain some very deep states, but you know, thinking about the Dhamma, as I had mentioned, that helps to deepen your understanding. Like the law of karma, for example. You might have heard about it, read about it. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But then when you go think about it, just go back in your life and think about the different things you did with out of greed, hatred, and delusion. Every time you broke a precept, what kind of suffering came to you? Or doing good things when you helped the neighbor carry their groceries or did some good deeds. What kind of pleasant things happen? So by thinking about that, it starts to make more sense. You know, that even things you did a couple years ago, they still follow you around, like telling lies or something like that with criminals or even just ordinary people. You know, we suffer a lot thinking about getting caught at some point and worry. That's mental suffering. So, you know, our results of our actions even follow us around for years and years and years, and even lifetimes, according to the Dhamma. So, anyway, so the third level of understanding is what is called the Bhavana Maya Panya, which means the deep insights that come when you've cultivated mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom to a fairly high degree. You get insights. So an insight is kind of like an aha moment. It's like a camera lens opening and closing real quick. That you see something, but sometimes you can't even put it into words. It was just, you know, oh, and it's gone because the mind will close so fast. In fact, that's what happened to me in that meditation course in Nepal. But something happened that it changed my life, and you know, it wasn't me doing it. You know, so, but anyway, that's kind of is that deep insights have that power to, you know, cause changes in your behavior and so on. So the right understanding, you know, that gets you to start practicing. And then as you practice, you develop that deeper understanding. And then you start gaining the you know, the benefits of that. And you're, you know, changing the way that you think and act, and developing more mindfulness, and developing more kindness and, you know, compassion towards others, and learning how to, you know, enjoy things more, like, you know, nature. Nowadays, I don't know, this new generation, you know, they're stuck on their cell phones and video games, and they are going to get out into nature to enjoy nature. I don't know what's going to happen later on. So the right understanding is like a roadmap. You know, if you want to go from A to B, you need a roadmap, or at least before internet. You know, I traveled from America all the way to India and all over without a cell phone, without a GPS, without ever having made a reservation anywhere, you know, just, but now people can hardly do anything without those things. But so some people say, oh, I don't need a roadmap. I'll do it myself. A person wants to drive from New York to California. They say, I just get in my car and drive. I don't need a road map. I don't need GPS. So they get in their convertible, take out a beer, smoke a joint, driving down, and wind up in Florida or in Montana. So, but you need to have a good map. You need a map maker. So the Buddha was a map maker. He made the map of the Eightfold Path and how to go from suffering to a state of happiness. And again, that begins with the right understanding and then the right thought. So right understanding has those three levels I just mentioned. Right thought also has three types of right thought. And it's thinking about the Dhamma. So the thought of lightening up, and the actual word in Pali is, means renunciation, nekkhamma. The thought of renunciation, but renunciation has a kind of a negative connotation to a lot of Westerners. And I think it just means being a monk or nun. But for lay people, it means just downsizing, simplifying one's life. People's lives are too complicated. They have all these things and gadgets they've accumulated from their great-grandparents and grandparents and parents. Their houses are full of all kinds of things, and they keep on wanting more. Every day of the week, they book up new. And so, they have no time to go on a retreat. Or they have, 7 or 8 dogs and they can't go on a retreat because they have to hire somebody to take care of them and feed them, or 50 house plants and somebody has to come over and water them. So, I can't go on a retreat. We've heard these excuses, right? The retreat centers. Because people's lives are too complicated. So simplifying one's life. So the mind's not so burdened with having to protect so many things that you probably never ever use, or just use once or twice. And the mind keeps wanting to accumulate more and more things. And so we have to have yard sales. People have yard sales and garage sales so that they can make room for more stuff that they want to buy. Their closets and garages get full, so they have to have a yard sale to make room for more. And how many of you have bought something you thought you really wanted, like a gadget for the house or a new piece of clothing or something, and came home and maybe used it once, or didn't even take it out of the bag, and then you forgot about it? But how much worrying and planning and I have to have that, I have to go shopping, and no, I can't go, I have to, and then wind up in a situation like that where you don't even use these things. Because people's minds are clouded, they're not that clear. So that's part of the thought of renunciation, nekkhamma sankappa. How nice would it be if I, didn't have all these burdens to worry about and have to protect. And so, like people that have a family, once the kids have graduated from college and they've gone out, they've got married, they have their own houses. Why are you living in such a big house that you have to, take care of and all that? Downsize, sell it, get a smaller place. So this is just one kind of, example. Or if you have 5 or 6 dogs and cats, when one dies, don't get another one. And when the next one dies, don't get another. Maybe be content with one. So there's many ways that you can apply that. And you'll see that the mind becomes more free. So that when you want to meditate, you sit down and meditate, and I forgot to feed the 3rd dog. or it falls sick, something is always going to happen. Now, people like to do that because they like to be busy. When people are busy doing everything, they don't really have to look into themselves. And that's why people they keep busy doing so many things, because it's a way not to, touch places inside that, hold a lot of yuck. But all that stuff has to come out before you reach true liberation. So the second of the right thought is the thought of non-ill will. So the antidote to that is practicing metta. So, some people have all their minds full of ill will, and they don't have a good word to say about anybody, and they're always complaining and criticizing and angry at this and this and that. It's really like a poison in their mind. So it's to think about being free from that. And the antidote would be developing metta, as I mentioned, I think, this morning. And then the thought of non-cruelty. So metta and cruelty are kind of, ill will and cruelty are kind of connected, because if you have ill will, then it's not a reach to be cruel to somebody. But if you develop metta towards others, then it's easier to practice compassion. That's why metta is usually the first of those Brahma Viharas. They're enumerated as metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, because metta is the easiest one to practice, because it's just developing thoughts of friendliness and just being friendly to people. But with compassion, you have to go out of your way to actually help them, by doing various things. It touches more your time. You have to go help an elderly person, or you have to, a relative says, come on over and help me, paint the house. I really need it. And, I'll pay my nephew $10 and he can go and help you. I want to watch the cricket match. So, attachments are attachments to things. The world, prevent us from sometimes practicing, compassion and metta. So those three types of right thought: the thought of lightening up, the thought of non-ill will, and the thought of compassion. These are all directly tied to the Dhamma teachings. Okay, now you got right understanding, and you got right thought. Now what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Clean up your speech. Practice right speech. Because we make a lot of karma with our speech. Probably more people get hurt by bad speech than bullets. The bullet wound can heal a lot of them, but a couple of one or two ill-directed words that a person at the right time could, cause years and years of tension and strife, and, amongst them. So the right speech is, I think we've already talked about that. Well, no, in the precept you talked about the speech about lying, but actually there's 4 types of right speech. Refrain from telling lies, because these might have the strongest effect, the karmic effect. But then there's malicious speech. And this is like telling tales of talking about other people behind their back, especially trying to ruin their reputation. And usually we do that so that people will focus, so people will look at the other people and not you. Politicians do that all the time, right? So they drag skeletons out of the closet of their competitors. And so people, we have a master of that in the office right now. But okay, won't go into that. So malicious speech. because that breaks up friendships and so on. And then people will find, oh, you told my secrets. I told you not to tell. Then you suffer. And then there's using harsh speech, like four-letter words, swear words, and so on, but especially with anger behind. That's why it's called harsh. It's directed at somebody like you, so and so. Nowadays, a lot of swear words, especially a couple of them, are such common words that they're kind of just not really swear words anymore. They're just words, exclaim something. They don't have necessarily hatred behind it. But especially that harsh speech, which would include telling jokes about people, especially ethnic jokes, other types of jokes that belittle people, and things like that. So there's a lot of karmic implications from that. And then there's what is called frivolous talk. That's a little bit harder to describe because there's a lot of gray areas in that. But it means wasting your time just talking chit chat and so on, like around the Thanksgiving table or family reunions, or when you get inebriated, you start talking a bunch of gibberish and so on. So, and then there's the right action. And there's three types of actions that we do with the body. Of course, killing or harming people physically with a fist or a weapon. And then there's sexual misconduct, hurting people, abusing people by that aggressive, that kind of energy, taking advantage of people and causing a lot of suffering. And of course, stealing. So we can see all those things. I mean, just think back in your life, all those four types of speech, especially the three types of speech, and those kind of actions. You may or may not have done some of them, probably at least one or two along the way, maybe all of them. And certainly others, because we read about it all the time. We can see how it causes so much suffering. So it is said that if people could just follow those 5 precepts, there probably wouldn't be need for Dhamma. Just think about it. If everybody on earth would follow the 5 precepts, just 5 precepts, it'd be like heaven on earth, There'd be enough for everybody. There wouldn't be any killing, stealing, nothing. I'm sure there would still be old age and death, but there wouldn't be all the social issues and wars and crimes and so on that we have. Just 5 precepts. Why can't they do that? Well, I already mentioned, because they don't have control over their mind. And that's why the last stages of I forgot to mention about right livelihood. So the 5th of those step of the Eightfold, right livelihood. That means basically having a job or a means of earning your living that wouldn't cause you to break any of those precepts, basically, for the most part, either directly or indirectly. But we can see that these days it's getting more difficult to have a job that doesn't come close to, doing that. Like in businesses, for example. Maybe a secretary has a job as a secretary, keeping books. And then the boss comes over and looks over their shoulder and say, well, why don't you change that, for tax records, change that 50 million just to 5 million. And the secretary said, well, that wouldn't be right. Well, there's 10 people waiting for your job. And so they feel coerced, pressured to break the precept or to do that. And then, they'll get blamed for it when the auditor comes, right? Oh, my secretary did. Anyway, and even in medical profession now, there's a lot of crooked things that go on with drugs and so many things. I'm not going to go into it, but so So especially with young people, when they're getting ready to build a career, really think carefully about the kind of job that you want to get, where you won't be forced to compromise like in the precepts. Because you're the one that has to go home and sleep at night from what you did. So typical examples of wrong livelihood for a Buddhist would be, of course, like raising animals to slaughter, working selling alcohol and drugs in bars and getting people drunk, and then they cause problems, and other addictions. There's so many. So that you can go home at the end of each day, you can say, I haven't hurt the flea. The mind doesn't have anything to worry about, at least on those terms. And so hopefully you'll have a better sleep and be able to wake up more refreshed. Now, the last 3 steps of the Eightfold Path, right effort. Right effort is basically the effort to do all the above. The effort to gain right view, that means go out of the way to read more Dhamma and get more right intellectual understanding, because then when you meditate, it gives you more food for contemplating in certain ways, or just in your daily life to help you. And then when you meditate, that understanding will then arise as insights. Because a lot of people, they sit down and meditate, and if they don't have something to directly focus on, then their mind just gets carried, in so many different ways. You have to have something to anchor it. And even the intellectual teachings, even to think about this. Within the Buddhist teachings, there's a lot of meditations that require thinking, but you can attain the first jhana. Even metta, you can attain the first jhana, or the other ones, practicing mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of death. There's a lot of things he's thinking about these things. You can get into a deep state. In fact, that first meditation course I mentioned that I took in Nepal, it was all about thinking. We didn't do any of this kind of meditation, really. We'd read something in a book, a chapter in a book on a certain topic like suffering. And the Lama would give a lecture, 1 or 2 lectures on it. And then we had to sit and just think about it, go through all these 4 or 5 points. And, it was very powerful, because you can get caught up in that. But it's right thought, it's thinking about the Dhamma. Okay, so now there was some questions left over from yesterday, and I thought I might just try to read a couple, and the rest of them maybe later tonight. Are non-self and reincarnation contradictory? If I am reincarnated, then the self does outlast this life. Now, first of all, in Buddhism, we don't use the term reincarnation. That's a term that's usually used in Hinduism, although it's a matter of pedantics in speech. But so Buddhists use the term of punabhava, that means becoming again, which basically means being reborn again. The mind seeking another life to